Dialect in films. Examples of South Yorkshire. Grammatical and lexical features from Ken Loach films. Kizzy Edensor, University of Provence. Laboratoire de Parole et Langage. Abstract. This paper focused on the English dialect in South Yorkshire, examining both traditional and more mainstream aspects over a period of 30 years. The hypothesis behind this study is that the degree or broadness of dialect decreases throughout the years, tending towards a more level, less regionally marked English. The corpus consists of scenes taken from 3 films directed by Ken Loach. They are Kes, 1969, Looks and Smiles, 1981, and The Navigators, 2001. It seems important to study traditional and to discover which changes can be observed over this period of time. Keywords: dialect, South Yorkshire, grammar, lexicon, films, Ken Loach. Introduction. 1. The purpose of this article is to give a description of the regional dialect that was found in South Yorkshire in 3 Ken Loach films from 1969 to 2001. The films are Kes, 1969, which was set in Barnsley, Looks and Smiles, 1981, and The Navigators, 2001, which were both set 15 miles to the south in Sheffield. Using 3 films enable us to add a chronological aspect to our research, and we were especially interested in the evolution of the dialect in South Yorkshire from a grammatical and lexical point of view. Research in dialectology has been on this increase since the first studies by Labov, 1976, Trudgel, 1979, and Wells, 1982. Wells was the first to differentiate between traditional dialects, those that are spoken by a linguistically conservative, typically rural people, and mainstream varieties. Research on variation and evolution of regional dialects has led to studies on dialect leveling, which has been proposed as an alternative to Labov's chain shift model, Milroy, 1999, to explain change. The change shift model is a phenomenon in which several vowels undergo changes and shift by a process of retraction or rising along the phonological vowel space. Studies that have examined dialect leveling, Milroy, 1999, Williams and Kersil, 1999, have argued that traditional features and being replaced by more mainstream features. Milroy, 1999, explained that the salient pattern of change is a reduction in variability across 2 generations. Localized variants either disappear or are reduced in number. So we have 2 objectives. The first is to describe the dialect found in these films. The second, to observe any change. This paper is divided into 3 parts. First of all, we briefly examine work that has been done on regional dialectology in the area. This is followed by a description of 4 corpus and the reasons for using it. The second part gives detailed examples of our dialectical dialectal description from the three different periods, 1969, 1981, and 2001. In the final part, we discuss the result of the study and attempt to reevaluate whether this variety has undergone by any change over the 30-year period. 1.1. The notion of standard and non-standard English. Defining the notion of standard and non-standard language is not an easy task, and there is much disagreement between authors. One explanation for this could be due to the fact that when talking about how we speak, much of our personal history is involved. Speech does not only convey meaning but says a great deal about our social background. In Britain, terms such as standard and non-standard English were originally used to signify good English, English spoken in court or by educated people, or bad or vulgar English, which was often a synonymous of regional dialects. Wild, 1907, Trudgill, 1979, classes standards English as a dialect, which he considers as the most socially prestigious English, the one that is used in official writing and publications. Non-standard varieties have grammatical forms such as double negations. I didn't do nothing. And although these forms are not usually used in everyday press, they can be found in certain publications, for example, those of the Yorkshire Dialect Society, where poems and prose are published in their dialect. Trudgill, 1979, defines a dialect as having mainly social origins and refers to grammatical and lexical aspects. Therefore, everyone speaks a dialect, and it is not simply spoken in rural areas. For Wells, 1982, a dialect includes phonetic, grammatical, lexical, and social variations. He opposed modern and traditional dialects. The latter is used in a specific geographical area in parallel with English. An interesting point of view is given by Chevillet, 1991, who distinguished between social and regional dialects. He admits that it can sometimes be difficult to differentiate between the two. One example is Cockney dialect, which is both the stereotypical dialect of the East End of London and London's working class dialect. 1.2. The history of South Yorkshire. In 1974, Yorkshire was divided into three new administrative regions: North Yorkshire, which was originally known as the North Riding, and the South and West, which had originally formed the West Riding, and East Yorkshire, which kept its original name of the East Riding. A natural barrier formed by the rivers Humber and Lune crosses Yorkshire, separating the Midlands from the far north. During the Anglo-Saxon period, this line separated two kingdoms. In the north, the kingdom of Northumbria, where the Northumbrian dialect was spoken, and in the south, the kingdom of Mercia, where the Mercian dialects was spoken. Kellett, 1992, explains that the North and East Ridings still have dialects features dating back to the Northumbrian dialect, and that the West Riding has origins from Mercian. During the Industrial Revolution, people from the neighboring ridings came to work in the West Riding. Kellett, 1992, suggests that due to this geographical history, there are more dialects features in the West Riding, now South Yorkshire, than in the North and the East. South Yorkshire is situated between two linguistic areas, the Midlands and the far north. It would therefore be expected to find influences from these two regions in the dialect of South Yorkshire. One point three, Dialectology and South Yorkshire. There is little information concerning grammatical and lexical features in the south of Yorkshire. Chevillet, 1991, reports that when talking about a period of time or quantity, there is no plural form, thus 4 mile. An example from the SED, Sheffield, cited by Wakeling, 1972, is the use of the suffix "sen", which is attached to a pronoun and is used as an equivalent to standard shelf or selves. This term originated from the English. This term originated from the Middle English term "soilen." Thus, myself becomes mysen, and himself becomes hysen. According to the SED, 63% of the Yorkshire informants used the suffix "sen". Wakeling, 1972. Stoddard, Upton, and Widowson, 1997, explained that the use of "d" and "d" were traditionally male preserves and "d" was pronounced "d". Sheffielders were traditionally known as "d-das", "d-dos", because of this phenomenon. Stoddard, Upton, and Wisdomson, 1999. Other features that have been observed in this area include the use of the auxiliary "were", which is used for the singular, and "was", which is used for the plural. For example, "I were" and "we was". Sheffielders are known to put the light on, rather to put on the light, as will be more common in standard English. 1.4. Choice of corpus. A limited amount of linguistic research has used films for the corpus. There exist some studies on actors. John Lewis, 1986, examined the fundamental frequency of non-professional actors in 3 different speech styles: reading, acting, and conversation. And Gusenhoven, 1986, used British television series in his intonation research, which he classed as quasi-spontaneous speech. He remarked on the fact that using actor is much better than using spontaneous speech because, unlike the latter, it does not contain mushy materials like false starts and repetitions. We did not find any previous research on dialect in Ken Loach films. Several reasons motivated our choice of corpus. Ken Loach is renowned for his social and political films. His first television film, Caddy Come Home, 1966, led to the creation of a homeless charity, the Shelter Foundation. This film took place in London and didn't encounter any problems of comprehensibility. This changed with the film Cass, 1969, which took place in Barnsley, South Yorkshire. The actors' accents were very broad, and the producer considered dubbing the film using a more standard and comprehensive English before showing the film in the UK and the United States. This was to be This was to become a recurring issue, and other films were later subtitled in English. Ken Loach is renowned for using people with strong regional accents. He explains this choice in an interview for Cineaste. In this regard, you don't iron our regional accents, which tend to be obliterated in mainstream British and American films. Riff Raff was even subtitled in this country, USA. Loach. If you ask people to speak differently, you lose more than the voice. Everything about them changes. If I ask you not to speak with an American accent, your whole personality will change. That's how you are. My hunch is that it's better to use subtitles than not, even if that limits the films to an art house circuit. There are several reasons that led us to believe that Ken Loach films contain quite natural, spontaneous speech and therefore hold great potential for dialect study. The most important reason is his use of non-professional actors. Loach chooses people who are similar to the characters in the film. For example, in Cass, 1969, the actors are mainly ordinary locals or local amateur actors. David Bradley, aged 14, who plays the main character Billy, was picked out of a local Barnsley school and had only ever acted in pantomimes and school plays. Loach explains that he does this so that they have an authentic accent. They are also more likely to be concerned by the social issues dealt with in the film. The actors usually receive the script just before shooting and are strongly encouraged to use their own words. In The Navigators, 2001, there is a large difference between the written script and what is actually said in the film. The fact that the actors are originally from South Yorkshire suggests a strong feeling of belonging to the area. It could be possible to compare this with Labov's in 1976 work in Martha's Vineyard, and his explanation that people's sense of belonging to an area accentuates the dialect features in their speech. Loach takes almost as long casting as he does filming. He looks for people who are similar in their social and regional origins to their characters, often hiring people who are unemployed or minors in the film deals with these themes. We choose to use these films because of Loach's unique way of working, but also because of his long career. It was possible to study a 30-year period. If we consider all of these reasons, it seems reasonable to say that the speech in the films can almost be classed as semi-spontaneous. The next part of this article exposes grammatical features, lexical variation, and expressions found in each film. Two, dialect features in Ken Loach films. For each film, we decided to select 5 scenes. Our description is based on these 5 scenes. Before determining which scenes to use, we analyzed former studies and dialect literature concerning South Yorkshire or surrounding areas. and determined which features had already been recorded. We begin with an auditory analysis in order to identify the scenes which the most striking or unusual features. In order to single out important scenes, we listened to each film several times and then choose the ones which presented the most interesting and novel aspects of the dialect, including unknown expressions and passages of words that we were at first unable to comprehend. Although most of the actors come from working class backgrounds, we are aware that they are still actors in a film, and for this reason we shall not attempt to draw any sociolinguistic conclusions. Our objective is to describe the most striking and common features found in these films and to examine any evolution. The grammar in these films is a mixture of standard and non-standard forms, but it is always difficult to separate social characteristics from regional ones. For example, replacing the article de by a glottal stop or a t is characteristic of this variety in general, whereas the non-standard use of to be is generally associated with the working class. This kind of phenomenon is found in case in the teacher's speech. In real life, this person works as a teacher and therefore theoretically does not belong to the working class. He uses a glottal stop to replace the article de, but does not use any non-standard grammatical forms. It will appear that there are different levels of variation. One that differs on a social level, a second kind which is found in the north of England, but not in the south, and the third which is found only in South Yorkshire. There are cases where certain dialect expressions could be mistaken for standard English. For example, A. Kellett mentions words that are orthographically the same in standard English and the dialect of South Yorkshire, but are semantically different. For example, gang, not a group of people, but the verb to go. Real, a description of something good or outstanding, not a reference to genuineness. Brat, not necessarily a child. This could be an apron. Starved, relating to feeling cold rather than a state of hunger. Sharp, using the sense of quickly rather than having a point of edge or a point or edge. Right, employed not only to indicate direction but as an intensifier in the sense of vary. Cass 1969. In the selected scenes there were 11 speakers, 9 males and 2 females. These included 2 main characters, Billy and his teacher, Mr. Farthing, who was in his 40s. In this film, non-standard grammar is often encountered, and some sentences have several typical examples. The following sentence is used to talk about a past event, but out of context, has no elements that show that it is situated in the past, and keep on to Missen saying that fly is free next day. The term next day signifies tomorrow. Another example is in the same context of Billy describing how he trained his hawk. Is so while I walking back, I saw her flying. She came like a bomb about a yard off floor, like lightning, head still, and you couldn't hear wings. There wasn't a sound from wings and straight onto glove. Wham! And she'll grab for meat. This is also a good example of the absence of the article D. 2.1.1 Verbs and auxiliaries. Auxiliaries. The auxiliary be was the most frequently used in non-standard forms or was completely absent. For the first person singular we found I were pleased, I terrified, and for the third person we found she were stood there, that were. Isn't is often replaced by ain't, but this is normal in other varieties. Chevrolet, 1991. The main character, Billy, often uses the term won't or won't. It is difficult to know whether this corresponds to wasn't or weren't, even though the latter seems more plausible. The auxiliary have also undergoes different transformations or is absent. For example, I see him in the sentence no, I've to tell you why. Have does not have the meaning of an obligation but means I'm going to tell you why. In general, verbs are conjugated in non-standard forms, usually with a final s. I knows, I says. 2.1.2 Endings. The endings ing is pronounced in, and ed was often ed or was absent. 2.1.3 Pronouns and possessive adjectives. The and the are used to replace standard English you and your. The traditional pronoun ending with "san" was found missing. My is often reduced to my, for example, my mom, my mother, and my hand. This is also found in other parts of the north of England. What is often used is a non-standard manner. For example, in the sentence, a fact is something that you find evidence out. 2.1.4 Plural and possessive forms. S is frequently absent in possessive forms or when talking about quantity. So the kestrel's nest become kestrel's nest, and 20 miles is said 20 mile. 2.1.5 Word order. A sentence word order is often slightly different to that of standard English. For example, there's not to go up for there as opposed to there's nothing to go up, therefore in standard English. 2.1.6 Dialect expressions. We will not present some expressions found in these films and that we have classed as being part of the dialect. We found the following expressions. She'd be right sharp, which according to Kellett, 1992 means very quick. The word ramshack is believed to be an abbreviation of ramshackle, meaning derelict, flimsy. The word rattle, usually associated with something that makes a noise, is found in the phrase "D has got too much, rattle D," to imply that the speaker talks too much. Nick in the expression I nick is a negation and an old word for the devil. The word about is often replaced by over in certain expressions. He goes mad over it, or he is. Crackers over it. Standard English will be he is mad about it. He is crazy about it. Note and old often replace nothing and something in this film. Other non-standard expressions were how the going on. The auxiliary are is absent and the term going on is used to express the meaning of how are you. Hands off cocks on socks, which is an all army expression used when soldiers got up. Then was the expression for which we can only speculate on its signification. To stand there like a nail, which could mean to stand still. 2.2 Looks and Smiles, 1981. There were 6 speakers in the selected scenes, 4 males and 2 females. The two main characters were Mike Walsh, played by Graham Greene, and Alan Wright, played by Tony Pitts. They are both in their late teens, early 20s, and in real life, one is unemployed, and the other is an apprentice mechanic. Most sentences in these films clearly showed the kind of non-standard forms that were encountered. For example, when the main character's father tries to convince him to phone about the job advert, he says, "I mean, there will not be only one that's seen advert that I knows. Here, go give him a right should thee." Besides the use of thee in this sentence, we can also know the non-standard form of known as the word inversion at the end of the phrase. 2.2.1 Verbs and auxiliaries. The auxiliary be was the most frequently used in non-standard forms and was completely absent. For example, anyway, what you after, or I were walking. The auxiliary has different forms or is absent. For example, all the jobs that has gone, how old you got to be. In general, verbs are conjugated in non-standard forms, usually with the final s. I knows, I says. 2.2.2 Endings. The ending eng is pronounced ian, and ed was either a glottal stop or absent, so that look and looked were homophones. Look, loo. 2.2.3 Pronouns and possessive adjectives. The and the are used to replace standard English you and your. The traditional pronoun ending sin has found missing. My is often reduced to me and myself can be repeated in a sentence that begins with I, which would be impossible in standard English. I give and a ring me. I can see different myself in you. 2.2.4 Word order. A sentence word order is often slightly different to that of standard English. For example, fed up me as opposed to I'm fed up in standard English. I will fetch police you on instead of I will get the police onto you in standard English. 2.2.5 Dialect expressions. Many expressions were often slightly different than they would be in standard English, but were still understandable. Is up on his bang. Up is often added when talking about a place or giving directions in the north of England. Note and own often replaced nothing or something in this film. Sick and fed up, or whereas it is more common to say sick and tired of. on replaced of, for example, never heard of on him. I am fed up of listening to time out obviously means that the person is tired of listening to the other person. Right was often used emphatically to mean very. For example, they are right snug. Like was also used emphatically to mean for example. This is quite common in working class speech. An example of this is, hey look, like have one regiment versus another like. Before they will set you on means, before they will hire you. They get shot and all signifies to live and all corresponds to as well. In this film, the term next year means another year, for example, and to think they kept him on at school for a next year because they couldn't find him a job. There was one expression where we can only speculate on its meaning. Wouldn't mind being a mechanic than a horse for this. One plausible explanation given the context will be to say that because the character is talking about army tanks, we presume that he is referring to the fact that he would rather fix a tank like a mechanic than have to pull one like a horse. 2.3 The Navigators, 2001. In the select scenes, there were 16 male speakers. Some only had one sentence. The average age was 45. In this film, there are more non-standard grammatical features than dialect expressions. Typical examples can be seen in the following sentences. In the following sentence, I reckon 6th sector track cable to replace on well. They do a little bit less than us. Cause for being on 15. 2.3.1 Verbs and auxiliaries. The auxiliary be is only non-standard in the third person singular. He were fucking useless on tracks. The auxiliary have is usually in a non-standard form. Has you made a star yet? In general, verbs are conjugated in non-standard forms for most frequently with a final s. I knows, I says. 2.3.2 Endings. The ending ing is pronounced in, and ed was quasi-systematically a glottal stop or absent, so that finished work was finished work where homophones finished with. 2.3.4 Pronouns and possessive adjectives. D and D are sometimes used to replace standard English you and your. Us is used instead of our. For example, us notes. The traditional pronouns ending with sin was found just seen for yourself and tigian, which we believe means together. 2.3.5 Plural forms. S is frequently absent in plural forms or when talking about quantity. So 10 yards become 10 yard and 2 weeks is said 2 week. Plural S is often absent. For example, the sentence we don't have a clock off on Sunday now is announced even though the speaker is talking about Sundays in general. 2.3.6 Dialect expressions. There were less dialect expression in this film than some of the ones found were quite common in the north of England in general. For example, you can't pull that one on me, which signifies you can't fool me. Do that to me. To take the Mickey corresponds to take fun out of something, someone, or something. Other expressions included right was often used emphatically to mean very. Like was also used emphatically to mean for example. This is quite common in working class speech. Now and would often replace nothing or something in this film. For example, course you do on gym means course you have to do it. Something gym. Up is added to sentences. Being sent up to find out. Working up. Agency now. To swing lead is to pretend to be sick so you don't have to go to work. This can also be heard in the Midlands. You've got the right number means to have good luck. Shuffing is a more polite way to swear. Discussion. In the three films, there were non-standard grammatical features and dialect expression, but they were both decreasing in the last film. 3.1 Features that were present in all films were B. Where forms were nominal, were normal in the singular and was formed in the plural, though the latter was decreasing. Have was used in non-standard forms in all three films. The pronouns they and D were present in all films but appeared to be very much in decline. We recorded the reflexive pronouns in their traditional form, such as myself, mysen in case, mycen, and looks and smiles. Reflexive pronouns that end with sen were still present in the navigators, just sen, but less so than in case. In all three films, S was added to the first person singular present tense, I knows or I'm gonna. The ending in is pronounced in all films. There was either a glottal stop or was absent. Node and ode were common in all films. Up was added when talking about a place or giving directions. 3.2 Features that were only present in two films include absence of plural s in major nouns, 20 mile, 2 week. This was present in Kes and the Navigators. Ed could be pronounced id only in the first film and was either a glottal stop or absent in all films. Word order was different compared to standard English. For example, in the sentence, well, there's no to go up for there, fed up me, compared to there's nothing to go up there for, I'm fed up in standard English. This was found in Kes and Look and Smiles. Prepositions were replaced by different ones in this dialect. For example, about was replaced by over in certain expressions. He goes mad over it, or he's cracked over it, off was replaced by on. I never heard on him instead of I never heard of him. This was only found in Kes and Look and Smiles. The auxiliaries was or were could be omitted, but only in the first two films. Next day mean tomorrow in Kes, but next year mean another year in Looks and Smiles. 3.3 Dialect expressions. None of the expressions that that we have classed as dialect appeared in all of the films, that is, in the scenes that we selected for our research. The only expression that appeared in the first two films was how the going on, and was used to express the meaning of how are you. In order to say whether these expressions are truly dialectical, it will be necessary to study the films completely. Another way to ensure that these expressions only belong to this specific dialect would be if we have found them mentioned in other studies. We found no record of these expressions in other reference work. It would be logical to assume that the older the expression, the more likely is reflect traditional dialect, as there were fewer means for the expressions to be heard in different areas because people traveled less and there was also less media. Case was set in a more rural area, and it seems therefore natural to find more traditional features. Dialect expressions were rare in the last film. Most of the expressions found in the Navigators were expressions that were common in the north of England or in the Midlands. This finding suggests that some features of this dialect are receding. Most of the characteristic features of the dialect grammar recorded in the CSED have inevitably moved toward more standard forms. One reason could be that there was greater social and geographical mobility in 2001 compared to 1969. The fact that the actors in case are from a smaller, more rural town may be a reason for the presence of more traditional features. If there is a decrease in the degree of dialect, does it affect all aspects of speech in the same way and are more moving towards and more standard English, or just regionally leveled one? Features such as the use of thee, thou, and thee, first and third singular verbs were expected to be found, and our result correspond to the literature on South Yorkshire. Beale, 2004, discusses the continued existence in the traditional dialects of many parts of the northern England of thou and thee. Wales, 2004, confirms the use of thee and thou in Sheffield and the use of thee in Barnsley among school children. In spite of this, we found the use of thee and thee to be decreasing. Unmarked plurals in noun measures are also said to be typical of this region. This result was found in Kes but continued to appear in the Navigators. In regards to the traditional pronouns missing, they were also less common in the last film. There was an increase of the use of like and right in the last two films, which we believe corresponds to a general social trend in the north of England, where these terms can also be heard. Although these expressions appear to be characteristic of this variety, we do not think they are part of the dialect because of their widespread use in the other regions. For the ending ing, we had expect to find either ing, which had been predicted by Trudgill, or eng, which had been reported by Wells. Our results show that the former is the most common in this group in this corpus. The transformation of plosives into glottal stops has already been reported by Stoddard, Upton, and Widowson, 1997. We did not expect this to concern final ed as it did in all three films. 4. Conclusion and further studies. Our initial objective was to describe this variety and to try to find out whether dialect forms had continued to exist over the 30-year period. From our result, it is obvious that many features have disappeared or are in decline. We could state that we found it very hard to understand the first film, slightly less the second and much less the third, even though it could be argued that this is due to familiarity. But each dialect aspect seems to change at different rates. There were less non-standard grammatical forms and less dialectical expression in the 2001 film than in the 1969 film. One could of course argue that this is a conscious choice on behalf of the film director to use actor whose speech is less regionally marked. But Ken Loach affirms that this is not the case, and any differences merely reflect changes due to different periods. If we consider the age of the actors in The Navigators, some were in their early 30s, but others were nearly 60, so they were young adults at the time that Kes was filmed. This could explain any similarity between the two films. The fact that many features found in Kes were absent in The Navigators will also confirm the hypothesis that South Yorkshire dialect was undergone some kind of dialect leveling, but other aspects remain and show no sign of decreasing, such as the pronunciation of eng and the pronunciation of final ed. So while some aspects have disappeared, others persist. The fact that the characters were mainly male in this study could be an explanation as to why some of the features remain throughout the three films, bearing in mind that men generally tend to retain localized forms more than women. Labov, 1976. The question is, are the features that have disappeared more representative of this dialect than the ones that continue to exist? The answer to this is probably positive. Many features that are found in the last film can often be associated with other regions, although it was something hard to understand The Navigators. It was definitely easier than for Kes. We do not think that this dialect is undergoing any kind of standardization, but is leveling surrounding varieties, and it will be misleading to describe these features as standards of any kind. According to Watt and Milroy, 1999, dialects cannot be compared even to a regional standard. This is because standards by definition are institutionally imposed, like the now recessive British prestige, accent RP, and the essence of a leveled variety is that it develops quite regular sociolinguistic processes. Watt and Milroy, 1999. To conclude, we could say that the dialect in South Yorkshire did show some change, but the changes did not affect all features in the same way. We could therefore argue that South Yorkshire dialect is evolving toward a more mainstream dialect in regards to certain features, but not all of them. In order to test the degree of leveling that we have found in this study, we will be interesting to compare our results with other results found in the region from even more recent periods.